Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Lauren, and today I'm going to be discussing all of the books that I read in December. Okay, so first off, two things I want to mention. First of all, it's really great to be back after the Christmas holidays. I hope you all had a great Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever winter holiday you celebrate. I hope it was great. I hope you had a wonderful time with friends and family. Second of all, there is some sort of machinery being used in my neighborhood right now, and the sound of it is going to drive me crazy if it doesn't stop soon. If you can hear it, I apologize. Hopefully at some point they will shut whatever that thing is off. So apologies for that. All right, so to the matter at hand, my December reading. In December, I started a grand total of 6 books, which I completed 4 of them. One of them was a DNF, and one of them, this is kind of a new thing for me, but I think I'm going to start doing it more often. I have demoted a book to my nightly reading book. I'll talk more about that in a minute when I get to it. Across all of the books that I read a grand total of 2,286 pages. As far as star ratings go, I had 2 4.5s and 2 3.5s, and like I said, the DNF and the demoted book. Overall, I feel like it was a pretty good reading month. I read a couple of books that I really enjoyed, a couple that were pretty average, and a couple that not the greatest, but that's okay. It was a mixed bag, so overall I would say it was enjoyable enough. Now, as usual, I'll be talking about all of these books in the order of the one I liked the least all the way up to the book that I liked the most. That way we can end on a high note. I think that is it. Let's just jump right in and talk about everything that I read in December. All right, so first up, the book that I liked the least of everything that I read in December, and honestly a book that I'm going to try to not rant about. It is The Wanderers by Meg Howry. This is a sci-fi novel, and it is about a group of astronauts who have been selected to participate in this simulation program. It's a simulation of a Mars expedition. It bounces from their different perspectives between all of these astronauts, their family members. You're in their head. And each chapter is like in a specific character's head. I ended up DNFing it almost exactly at 33%, the third mark, which usually before I DNF a book, I try to get halfway, and I tried, but this book, I just could not do it. To be fair, something I did really like about this book before I launched into what I really didn't like about it, conceptually, I loved the idea of this book. I mean, obviously I picked it up when I read the synopsis. I was just like, that sounds super cool. Sounds like something that I would really love. Really, the focus of this book was this sort of, these characters, they're like interpersonal struggles, their internal thoughts and dialogue, which, God, it was, these were, without a doubt, some of the most hateable characters that I have ever read, which is ultimately why I ended up putting this book down. I could not spend another minute in these people's heads. The kind of conversations that they were having in their mind versus what the other characters were observing about them, they were completely fake and very insecure, very kind of mean almost. A couple characters were just emotionally unstable, which I'm beginning to find that a big pet peeve of mine in sci-fi novels is characters being chosen to go on space expeditions who are completely mentally and emotionally unstable. It is so far-fetched to me that would ever happen. Like, in reality, when people are selected to go into space, which is arguably one of the most stressful situations a human being could possibly be in, they are run through the ringers psychologically to make sure that they are mentally robust enough to handle the experience. So whenever I read a sci-fi novel where the characters are just that unstable, it is so distracting. I can never get invested in the storyline. I can never believe in the characters or get behind them. That's it. Those are my feelings in a nutshell. I'm going to stop right there. I could probably keep going, but yeah, I don't feel like ranting any more than that. So it was a DNF for me. This may, if you are more into like sort of a literary in characters' heads and their sort of internal struggles, this may be for you, but absolutely 100% not for me. All right, next up we have the book that I have decided to demote to my nightly reading book. It is The Sleepless by Victor Manabo. This is a sci-fi novel, and it is set in a world where there has been a pandemic that has caused a good chunk of the world's population, like a quarter of the world's population, to no longer need sleep. And this book follows a character who works at, I think it's like a marketing or an advertising agency or something. This character, he goes into the office one day and his boss is at his desk dead. The boss's office is kind of, the way that this has all gone down is very suspicious, so it causes the main character to decide to start investigating what may or may not have happened. The police, they come up with some sort of explanation to write the whole thing off, and the character, he just doesn't believe that this is what's happened. I love this concept, the concept of this book. Being a person who has struggled with a sleeping disorder my entire life, pretty much. I don't know, a book that incorporates like sort of the sleep thing, the sleep concept, the sleep issue. I don't know, it just really appealed to me. I like the idea of it. And I really like all the characters in this book. I really like a lot of things about this book. However, I did decide to demote this because this was just too slow for me. It's very like almost procedural. The main character, he is not a police officer, but the way that he is sort of investigating what has happened, it is like a detective. It is very methodical, going and talking to this person and that person and thinking about it, and it's just not really my thing. So I can't sit down and just read chapters and chapters of this at a time. However, this book is not doing anything wrong, so I think I will continue on with this, just reading like maybe a chapter a night. I ended up demoting this at about 45%, so I'm nearly halfway there, and I don't want to give up on it yet. So hopefully by the end of January, I will have this completed and we'll be able to let you know if it ever got more exciting for me. All right, next up we have Race the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. This is a fantasy novel, and I think that this is a YA fantasy novel. I'm not totally certain. It reads like YA. The overall idea of this book, it is set in a world where reincarnation is a thing. If you are an evil person, you will be reincarnated as a Keyhawk. The only way to break this cycle of being reborn as a Keyhawk is to win a race. So these monsters are trained to run these races. Our main character, Tamra, is a trainer of Keyhawks. This story follows one character in particular, or one rider in particular, who has run away from her family to avoid a marriage that she does not want. Tamra finds her and decides to take a chance on her as a rider. She finds this one Keyhawk in particular that is like extra monstrous, but she believes will be a great racer, and she pairs this Keyhawk and this new rider to try to win these races. I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I really like the idea of this book. I really like that this is a standalone fantasy. That is a hard thing to find. Fantasy tends to just come in big long series, so I really liked getting into a fantasy world and just a one and done. I also like that this book was very like sort of female empowerment. I love that about this book. I ended up reducing it a little bit though, because, well, really for two reasons. The main reason was that though this was a very fun, exciting book with very likable characters, it was extremely predictable. I felt like about halfway through I knew exactly how this book was going to end. And so at that point it began to slow down for me, because it was like I knew what was coming and it felt like it was taking forever to get there. Also, there were some logistical errors, I guess, in this book that made it a little bit difficult for me to like buy into it. It was a little bit hard to suspend my disbelief totally for this book. That being said, it was a good time. I liked it. I will definitely remember reading it. I think it was a worthwhile read, so take that as you will. Next up the list, we have The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I think I'm going to go with, there's a little quote on the inside flap here of the book that says, "A new face of literary dark fiction." So I'll say that is the genre, literary dark fiction. The synopsis of this book is very cryptic, and it is meant to be very cryptic. Really all you need to know is that it is set in a house at the end of Needless Street, an old boarded up house. There are 3 characters in the house: a teenage girl, a man, and a cat. who have very interesting, strong personalities. And someone moves onto this street and starts like investigating whatever is going on in this house at the end of Needless Street. I'm gonna leave it at that. That's really, you don't need to know more than that going into this book. The main thing that I really loved about this book is that it is weird. It is very weird, and it really leaves you guessing. You're trying to make sense of it from the moment you start. You have this like, what the heck is going on kind of feeling. The back of this book has some like sources in it that it cites, that the author cites. I was flipping to the back of the book to see how many pages are in the book to try to, you know, plan out how many days I'm going to read this book across. And I saw one word in the source material. I'm not going to say what it is, but I saw one word in the source material and it spoiled this book for me. You know, there's going to eventually be some sort of explanation as to why everything's weird. And because I read this one word, before I even opened the book to read it, I knew what it was. So huge bummer. If you've read this book and you would like to know what that is, feel free to ask me down in the comments and I'll chat with you about it. I just don't. It will absolutely spoil the book. You know, I have a very good friend who we both read it this month, not at the same time. She completed it before me, but she read it and it was a super wild ride for her, and she had a good time reading it. And I feel like I would have definitely been leaning more in that direction if I hadn't spoiled myself. So go me. The twists and turns were fun though, and if you didn't know where it was going, I can absolutely see how this would be a lot of fun. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. Yes, you know, I definitely spoiled myself on this book, but that is not why I deducted the 1.5 stars that I did. The main reason that I did was that this sort of explanation as to why everything in this book is so strange, it's not my favorite. Although I feel like this book did it well. It feels like a little bit of a cop-out when an author says, this is why it was weird all along. That's just a personal preference. I really, truly believe most people don't feel that way. It's just very specific personal preference for me. But, you know, I love the way that Catch Your Own Award writes, and I feel like I would definitely pick up another book by this author. So still a good time, but friends, just don't flip through to the back of a book. You never know what you're going to see. Cautionary tale, I guess. So I learned a lesson, if nothing else. Next up, we have a book that was actually a reread for me, and it is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. The second book, Hellbent, is coming out this month. I have it pre-ordered, and I had read this long enough ago that I really just needed to refresh my memory for I know the broad strokes of it, but I needed like the finer details so that I would be prepared to read Hellbent, which I am so freaking excited about right now. I can't even. If you are unfamiliar with this storyline, briefly, this is about a character named Alex Stern who has kind of a dark, troubled past. She's accepted into Yale because she has this unique sort of magical ability, I guess. This is like a dark academia magic school type of vibe. Alex is accepted into Yale to join this group of people who monitor these very powerful secret societies, and just crazy stuff goes down. This book is told across different seasons. I think it's like last fall, winter, spring, and it bounces back and forth. Something totally crazy has happened when the start of the book, when it opens, and the book is kind of sort of weaving together what has gone down. There are a couple different like storylines going on here. Most people I've noticed who have reviewed this say that this one out of the two plot lines is far more interesting, and I agree, but whatever. I still love this book. Whenever I read it the first time around, I think I gave it 4.5 stars. I did not read this book thinking that I was going to have the exact same experience as I did the first time around. I knew that, like I said, the broader strokes of this book, so it wasn't, that sucked the excitement out of it to a certain degree because I knew what was going to happen. But I'm not going to dock my rating for it this time around just because I've read it before. That's not fair. I mean, I'm going to continue to let my previous rating stand. I can still stand behind that, even though my reading it the second time around was not nearly as profound. I love this book. I recommend it to anyone who likes dark academia, magic school settings. This book in certain parts can be quite disturbing. There are some trigger warnings associated with it, so if you have not read it before and you are interested, definitely check that out. But yeah, good time. Recommend it. If you can handle sort of the dark material of this book, I would definitely recommend it to you. And I cannot wait to read Hellbent and tell you how that goes in my January wrap-up. All right, last but not least, the book that I enjoyed the most of everything that I read in December, it is A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, and let me tell you, I absolutely adored this book. This is in the Wayfarer series. It's the second book in the Wayfarer series, though the books in this series are very loosely tied together. You do not have to read them in order. I'm just doing that because I have them all, so there's no reason to not. This is a sci-fi series. This book follows two characters. One of them is in the first book. Her name is Pepper, and she is sort of like, I don't know if you call her, not a mechanic, but she deals with the ship and the mechanics of the ship and sort of the maintenance and all that. And the second character is Lovelace, who was the ship's artificial intelligence from the first book. But in this book, she has been put into a body, so she's like an android, and which is an illegal thing in this world. So she's kind of trying to fly under the radar and not get caught. She and Pepper has sort of taken responsibility for her. This book follows two different storylines. The first storyline is these two characters in the present, Pepper and Lovelace, and the other storyline is Pepper basically when she was a child, so it's in the past, and how she became who she is. She's a very interesting character. Her story is absolutely fascinating. Pepper as a child sort of making her way in the world, and Lovelace as this AI, they're having these very similar experiences. This story was very thematically rich. I would say it primarily explores the themes of friendship and belonging and what it means to be human. The characters were so well developed and so sweet and lovable and relatable. The settings were unique and interesting. Like Pepper's childhood was just a very hard childhood. The setting is so well thought out, so well conceived. And then this present setting, it's so cool. It's almost kind of has this cyberpunk feel to it, just a lot of fun. I love this book. This is definitely one of my favorite sci-fi novels that I've ever read. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. The only reason that I docked it at all is because I feel like the end of the story was pretty rushed. Now, for any other novel, for how rushed this was, I probably would have docked even more, like a full star. However, what I loved about this book and the great qualities of this book really made up for that in a big way. Not perfect, but just nearly a perfect sci-fi read for me. All right, so I think that is going to be it today. These are all of the books that I started. Some I completed, a couple that I did not in the month of December. I would be very curious to know if you have read any of these books and what you thought about them. Also, did you read anything interesting in December? I would absolutely love to talk to you about it in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, I hope that you will like it and possibly subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.